Thanks for joining. After episode 1, where I gave an introduction on 3 case study on different business type and how can be different the multi-cloud journey of each based on their requirement, I'm going to highlight in this episode which are the components that need to be part of your thinking for a multi-cloud security strategy. There are a lot of products that focus, as we saw, on just the portability of the PaaS, but it's not only that made a multi-cloud journey. So now let's focus on one by one, and this episode is to give you the overarching conversation on which layer to touch. How to place, and there is no order in these icons that you see because they are all equally important. But for sure, as I explain in this slide, there are multiple options on how you can think portability and multi-cloud. And option B was the one where I was talking about focus on the pipeline. So that's clear that whatever you do, in any case, you need to focus on how you automate it and how is the pipeline. If you integrate the pipeline and you make it to be multi-cloud and integrate your security control in terms of automation, and you are sure that the pipeline is not a point of failure into your business recovery, you'll have a solid foundation to scale, to add new services, to do whatever you need. So as I said, I took the example of Red Hat because it's a solid, with OpenShift, a solid pipeline with GitLab, but I do GitOps, you need to focus on the pipeline itself. Another topic that you need to keep in mind, cloud services need a standardization on how you move, and the standard de facto for a transport bus is nowadays Kafka. So if you manage properly the encryption of each topic, is powerful because I give you a few case studies on how you can use it. Think that you are migrating from one SIM to another one. If you have a transport bus, it will serve you to duplicate the data on the fly and be capable to actually feed at the same time with the same data to platforms. These capabilities is something that is useful not just in terms of redundancy, routing of that data, but transport and standardize that. Each cloud service provider is nowadays having a Kafka client. GCP is one of the most difficult on that space, but if you think Event Hub, he always add it and always focus on that, and the same for AWS. So it's important for you to focus on what Kafka can achieve for you, how the fact that you can encrypt the topic on the fly, and how, for example, the fact that you can use KSQLDB on the stream to index data and not having the requirement probably also to store the data. You can just index it and that's it. It's really useful in terms also of cost and operation. And find that transport bus across all cloud service provider is going to give you and up your game. CDN, if you move across cloud service provider, having a CDN in front is mandatory, but you need to think about CDN not just in terms of application routing, but more in terms of the web application firewall and the security control that you have in that. If you do gain, you are in a situation where you get DDoS, the CDN is your mitigation. But if you are stuck to one CDN only, and you don't have a solution that work in the same way across them three, you don't have a proper multi-cloud. You just have a solution that can port something, but not a full flag kind of solution. When you talk about multi-cloud, you should step back on the overall design. We talk a lot about zero trust design, but you can't have a lasagna with different kind of architecture. Zero trust suppose that you don't authenticate only the user, but also the devices, and you do have a standard approach to that. So be 100% sure that all access, the way how you protect the underneath cloud service provider API and the consoles is through a proper SASE kind of design. I've also seen a lot of people talking about the front end in terms of application and not thinking that behind you need a tokenizer. At the time that you have portability, you need also to think how you can manage that tokenizer in a scalable way. Are you having a tokenizer for each? When you talk about tokenizer, you are talking about HSM, and you do have problem on make it actually redundant across all. So pay attention also to your FIPS requirement, and not all cloud service providers are the same in that terms. So sometimes investing in a tokenizer that is portable and scalable, it's really important. Now, DNS security is not just about how you load balance things, but if you think about DNSSEC, you'll have great problem in terms of application routing and how you recognize what is going on. There is probably where if you unify that DNS security across them all, you find a solution that always work. And certificate DNS security, those are all topics that are part of the operation, and not always each component is drafted in a lot of multi-cloud material. So these are things that you need to add to your thinking, especially when you discuss with vendors. API are not anymore REST API that is just verbose chatting across. Right now is with the GraphQL can be an entire query language, and the surface attack on API is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Establish API gateway that are multi-cloud is part of the real proper design. Now, I shouldn't mention because it's obvious that how IAM is a pillar of everything, but sometimes we find a lot of focus on having one identity or other situations that are scalable, but don't forget the history and the attacks on those kind of layer. The first one that comes to my mind, Okta or other. Try to think also in that situation what will be your incident response and process to keep that kind of scalability and security. DLP is one of the most complicated things. When you do A/B testing, or when you do deploy new application, what you consume, pipeline, data pipeline, complicate even more the conversation. So it's difficult for everybody to do DLP. Integrate it in your thinking from the very beginning, and they will not. Don't think that it's just a product. It's not. It's a culture. It's how you understand where is the data, which type of data, which value you give to the data. CA security, it's fortunately nowadays way easier than before, because you do have a lot of services that can take care of the CA security, but you can't demand and don't forget what is a shared responsibility model into cloud, and now you should standardize your process. There is where your pipeline can help. But it's also true that we talk about endpoint security, and when we talk about container, we do have approach with Istio or other gateway, but you need to have a standard across all. So I see this conversation approached by type of service, but you need to point on what is the standard that you want to achieve. Visibility is a big, huge topic, but if you converge everything in one layer, what it happens if it fails? What is the best way for you to have one visibility that work for operation in terms of performance and for security at the same time? That is optimization, I apologize, also from a cost perspective. Now, there are challenges in any design, but whatever company you are, in which case study you fit, you'll have data transfer in and out CSP cost. Consider those ahead, or because that is a variable that you don't control, and you want to be 100% sure if you need to decouple a function into your design, or if it's better to centralize that. Decoupling is not wrong. Sometimes you need to converge an upper layer. Keep it simple is mandatory, but consider a disaster recovery. The incident is way more relevant when you design. Incident response gets centralized, but you need to perform equally across all resources that you consume, and you can have some tools that are proprietary into that cloud service provider, and those get better and better day by day. You need to have a design that does let you to use it and consume it. If you use a third party and that third party doesn't support that feature, it's going to be a big cost in terms of standardization and performance, in terms also of security visibility. Zero trust design uniformity is something that I already mentioned, but it's really important. A SASE approach is mandatory nowadays. Everything is access to resources. Cloud console, 0 day in cloud are really common. If you added a layer of SASE design, you really are mitigating some of those risks. Supply chain risk is something that you not get rid into a multi-cloud design. It will only be on top of your to-do list. Each service is having API exposure. Invest in that API gateway that I'm talking about. That is the way to do a proper convergence and establish a standard across them all. Trying to protect those API. Don't expose an edge. Some Kubernetes design right now are going to change having an API gateway perspective. But so far we saw a lot of application where the API call was going straight into a container, and a compromise there was compromised the entire cluster. You need to think about this problem. You need to have a gateway. The attacker need to be stopped far away from your core. Data residency is something that is not only a problem of compliance, it's a problem to know where it's going. So you need to track your data, and A/B testing and all various way of dealing with that, it's going to add more and more challenges. But if you think an overall picture of a disaster recovery and the complexity of all these layers, you need to rethink and review your final draft, being sure to have redundancy across also your pipeline, your automation layer, because you can't have a situation where your disaster recovery point is not actually capable to operate properly. That is something that shouldn't be underestimated. My experience is that scalability and lock-in go hand in hand sometimes. You need to be capable to scale and have a standardization across your control, but you need to be capable to consume whatever new service security wise is provided out of the box from your cloud service provider. Capability to consume native security controls is directly related to lock-in and scalability and to the design, but also redundancy. All these capabilities means a long learning curve, You can find teams that are specialized in one cloud service provider. They dedicated an entire career on getting specialized in AWS, and out of the blue you add the other three. Be sure to consider that operational model, how effective it is, and how you can help them, because misconfiguration is on top of the issue that we see nowadays. Disaster recovery, I mentioned that every slide and every time I design. You can't design without thinking about disaster recovery. But incident response standardization, it's more a big level where everything is going there. Be sure that you don't confuse DevOps or DevSecOps like you did it. Check the data, check what you actually are capable, and nowadays capabilities into continuous forensics is really important. Here a quick walkthrough on how you can mitigate this risk. You need to avoid lock-in, you need to define open standards that allow. Don't confuse infrastructure as a code, as the panacea for everything. You need to be 100% sure that you do have the real automation across all type of service that you consume. Invest on transport bus, I stress that enough. Invest on IAM token and SSL management to be scalable. Supply chain risk, map it, use a framework, be sure to see it. As everybody always said, whatever is written, it's there, it's solid. Invest on continuous threat modeling, and by that, it's not just a buzzword. You are operating in the cloud, you have API, you are capable to have live threat modeling based on what is delivered. So think on an investment also on this stage where you see always the big picture in terms of threat. Disaster recovery on main CSP, evaluate continuous forensics. Now we are in 2024, you can think about forensics as the old man in black coming into your company for the one-off task. You need to have tools for memory analysis, for continuous forensics. We can't have data breach every day and don't invest in that area. But you need to establish also training and have all people align with your vision, with your direction, and with the tools that you define. Now I stop here for the next episode because I split it was going to be a big presentation, this one, and so I split it. The next one will be more on attacking on what you actually see across the main data breach that happen in multi-cloud, and how lateral movement is important. I will analyze that also in terms of meter techniques. So if you're interested, tune on the next one. Thanks a lot for having me. Take care.